We're going to try to load up some black powder cartridges now. Now in another video, like I was explaining, I had trouble resizing the brass, and I was going to try to do it without resizing, just get it down in there and crimp it with the black powder, using the bullet to rest against the powder in the wad. I tried that and I ran into some problems. It wasn't quite working, the bullets were loose and moving around. The amount of powder I had was close to the crimp groove, so if it slipped out of the light crimp, the bullet would be loose, and I didn't like that because you have to have compression on the black powder cartridge. So what I did is I just stopped, disassembled all the ammunition I had, went down, started from scratch, resized all the brass, reprimed it, flared the necks, and that's where we are. We're with a totally prepped case, ready to have powder put in and loaded. Okay, so now we go on to the black powder. Black powder is a little bit different than smokeless. You have to have the bullet seated and compressed against the powder charge in the case. And usually you put a little fiber wad on down in there, and the bullet rests on top of the fiber wad and presses down onto the black powder. And the bullet has to be seated on the powder. So with that in mind, what type of powder do we use? Now, on the internet, I've seen somebody publish some data and tested these rifles years ago for a gun magazine, and 77 grains of 2F is what a lot of people say. Now, another thing with black powder. Usually with a muzzle loader, black powder is measured with a powder measure by volume, much like this one here. If you set this to 70 grains, which I'd use in a musket or something, and try to fill this case, it almost fills the whole case up. You know, there's like a 1/4 inch left. So you're supposed to measure by volume with muzzle loaders. And where you're going to get into trouble with what they're doing is they're weighing the black powder on a scale. Now, probably that's all right, but if you try to put a black powder substitute, which does not go by weight, goes by volume, you can run into trouble. You can have some problems. So the only thing I deduced from all of this is when they mean 77 grains of 2F black powder, they mean 77 grains on a powder scale, on a scale, not on a measure. So there's a lot of confusion when people are looking up load data because nothing's published. And there's a lot of confusion. I had trouble figuring out what to do, and a lot of people out there. So the first load I did was 70 grains, weighed on a scale, with a soft lead bullet seated down where I was touching the powder and compressing it. And it worked out all right. And that was with 2F. Now someone said it was 70 grains of 1F was the military load, and the powder companies make, GoX makes a cartridge powder, and I'm going to use Swiss, and they have a 1.5 FG, or 1.5 F, which I think is kind of designed for black powder cartridges. It's in between 2F and 1F. And where the importance is I read a table or a chart that 80 grains of 2F loaded in, say, a muzzle-loading rifle produces the same amount of pressure as 100 grains of 1F. So you see your different size black powder, the finer it is, the less you need to exert pressure. So going with 1.5, we're right in the middle, and we know that we're not going to exceed the pressure. Or using 1F. You'd know you wouldn't exceed the pressure of filling this case up. So what I decided to try, I tried 70 grains of 2F. I'm going to try 75 grains of 1.5F. And how I came up to is after I fired the brass a few times, when I put the powder in. We'll charge the thing. You got 75 grains on the scale. We're going to put 75 grains into the case. And I experimented with this. I played around with it for a while until I got it right. Now there's ways to compress the black powder. You can use a huge drop tube, which the gravity will help compress it and level it out. Some people use a drop tube and put it in a reloading block and vibrate it. I just kind of look at it, tap it against the table slightly, kind of level it out in there. And then I take 60 thousandths thick I'm using. You can get them in 60 or 30 thousandths. And that'll also help you. The thinner one will let you get more powder in. And I just kind of push it down. Gotta do it carefully. Until I'm flat on the powder. You see, it's in there. So that's holding the powder in. Now what I do is take the dial calipers. I take a measurement down here. Okay, and once I got this measurement, the jaws are open. I go against the bullet and I see that it comes up about halfway to the last grease groove. So when I seat this bullet, if I can't see the grease groove, that means I'm pressing down a little bit onto the powder and I have compression. So that's how I reassure myself I'm seating it to the proper depth and the bullet's firmly down with the wad onto the powder. And then I just set it in there. These are a little tight. Run it up into the die, put a light crimp. I can bullet, the bullets can't see the grease groove. So I got a good cartridge with a good crimp. It ain't moving around on me. And using the calipers, I know that they have bullets sitting there on top of the powder and, kind of pressed down, a little bit of pressure on it. Nothing great. I think you want a maximum like about 1/8 of an inch, which that's about half a grease groove on that bullet. And there you got a black powder round loaded. Anything, use the comments. If you agree, disagree, see me doing something foolish, or have any questions, ask. And tomorrow, hopefully, if the weather's good, we'll go out and we'll shoot the gun, and I'll do a video on how the gun operates close up in action. Something a little bit different.